But if it's a slow thing, she caressed my jawline,
Yeah.
the velvet cloth of her gloves lingering on my beard, rasping through the hair. Like, there is more intensity in the description, and that slows the reader down because they're consuming the scene in more detail.
Yeah.
Whereas in an action scene where you're rapid firing those descriptions and sensory details, it feels to the reader like they're getting smacked with quick, jerky scenes.
Releasing your inner dragon. All right, Marie. So, our producer wants to talk about pacing. What is pacing? What does that mean to you? How do you use pacing? I mean, all these we're going to talk about throughout the whole thing, but start us off. Like, what is your thoughts on pacing in a novel, in a scene?
So pacing is pretty much one of the most critical parts of any given story. Pacing is how you get the reader to keep going, basically. It is how fast or slow the story unfolds. It is the rhythm of the story unfolding. And if your pacing is off, your reader disinvests from the story, they put the book down, and you're done.
Yeah, that is pretty much how I see it. Now we differ on a few different ways. Like and a lot of this has to do with writing style. My writing style. One of the things that I learned about myself when I was writing the Karaz novel for Harnworld, the thing that I just finished and is coming out this month. My writing style does not lend itself well to large action scenes because I'm such a limited writer that I'm in this one perspective, and I tend to, just like when I'm in an actual fight, I tunnel vision. And I do the same thing in my writing, and I never really noticed it because the way I plot my stories out, they're plotted on a very individual basis. And I think it's one of the things that really attracts my readers to my writing is that no matter what's going on in the story, you and one person are dealing with this thing. And you might be in a different head, in the next chapter, but it's always this, it's this kind of almost tunnel vision, and you're dealing with this, whatever we're dealing with. And so Carnage of Karaz deals with a fall of a city. And even though I only have one POV during it, the others are important, and they're also in the fight. And so I don't want to just forget about them. I don't want the reader just to like, oh no, there's no one else fighting shoulder to shoulder with me. I've made all these friends and everybody. And I found it very, very difficult personally to remember to not get too tunnel vision during the fights, to kind of like, there's a guy here and there's a guy here now, and we're fighting in a hallway. It's a bunch of dwarves fighting a bunch of orcs, and the orcs are invading this underground dwarven city. So where that comes with pacing is, it again, it's all through planning. And so I had to spend a lot of time thinking about when I was going to ratchet things up, because it's obviously a heavy fight, heavy combat oriented story. Those are much faster versus the downtimes in between, the moving to the next section, the tending to the wounded, and all of that. And so I don't know, it just made pacing really interesting for me. And I had to think about it in a different way because of the fact that I couldn't allow myself to just be in this one person's head, which I'm so good at.
So it's interesting that you bring up battle, because I've actually I'm busy reading Adrian Tchaikovsky's massive Ant-Kindred saga, Shadow of the Apt, and he's got a lot of battle, and I mean like big wars, sieges of cities, wars in multiple locations. Like he goes big on the movement of armies. And what I found so he has a very different style from either of us. He is quite happy to dive into somebody's head for like one scene to show you a thing in the battle. He doesn't care.
Right.
He's just like, nope, I now need to show you a night attack. So for the purpose of this night attack, you are going to be in the head of this character whose head you've never been in before. And it doesn't matter because I am taking you there on this night attack now.
And you'll never be in that head again.
And you'll never be in that head again because you're not there for the character.
Yeah.
You're there for the plot.
Yeah.
Right. Which, I mean, it's fair. It's a different style. And at first it was a little jarring. At first it was a little jarring for me, but now I just flow with it. I'm like, okay, there's the core characters whose head I'll always be returning to, and then there's the little one-off characters for the battles that he just uses to show you how the battle's going. And it makes his, like, this battle scene, this one siege scene, consumed, I think, like 7 or 8 chapters in the book. And we're not talking small chapters. You know, they're chunky chapters. And there are all these like different, there are night attacks, and then there's a quieter period while you're waiting for the attacks to come. Then there's the wave of attacks coming. Then there's this ship, you know, and it's like movement, and it keeps the battle very engaging. So I think, like, I didn't think I would say this, but I think there is a case to be made for battle scenes having point of view characters whose head you're not going to be in again. If your story is to show the full scope of the battle, like the entire scope, you are never going to write a story with that many growth characters.
Yeah.
That's not what you're going to do.
Well, and that's what I say all the time. It's these are things that we preach, but I never go, you must do it this way, because I can think of ways that you might need to break those. I mean, one of the guys in the writer's room last night, he's writing from the head of basically an immortal deity type thing. And that brings with it some very unique things to think about. You know, how do we connect my humanity, my moral understanding of moral values in my, 55 years of life, to a being that has lived for thousands of years? Like, how do I connect to his moral compass, if we're going to do this limited POV? And that becomes very, very complicated. So yeah, it's that, but it's also how you think about it. And again, that's why I was trying to bring this to how I plan. So like with that, let's say I am writing a bigger battle scene where I know I'm going to have different aspects. I need to track what's going on at sea and toward, coming in and trying to take over the port area. And I've got a land thing, and I've got something underground and all that. When I'm planning that story out, I'm going to be going, okay, well, if I got to tell this, that means I need a POV character, which means now that POV character needs an entire story arc, start, finish, middle, start, middle, end. They need a motivation. They need a goal. They need something that, yes, they're going to, let's say they have to, get this sword from this city, whatever. Okay, great. But that's a secondary kind of motivation to most of the characters. Maybe one of the characters, like, his whole life hinges on it. But everyone else is like, okay, yeah, I need to get the sword, but only because of this other thing that I need, or only because of this other thing I need to happen, or only because of this other person I need to save or do, or this other thing. So everybody has to have their own unique motivations. So I could still accomplish the same thing, depending, and again, this is a fictitious situation, so who knows, but I would just, during the planning stage, just start going, okay, well then now I'm going to need a character that ends up at this battle from the land side, and then another character from here. Again, could it get too big? Could I need 10, 12 different aspects? And then it's like, no, I'm not going to make 10, 12 different POV characters just to accomplish that. I mean, in my little thing, I'm like, well, I'll give you 3, maybe 4.
And that I think is the thing, is like he really went bananas with his, like, the level to which he shows you the battle.
Right.
And like, I understand why he did. Like, I understand why he brought in all of those little POVs. And that it's interesting because you're so invested in the overall plot events of the city, like everybody's plot events, that you want to know how the night attack went. So
Mhm.
even though you're in this Mantis Kingdom's head only for this period, right, only for this attack, you still want to know how it went, and it is still more interesting to see it on the page than just to get a report.
100%.
But that being said, that book is an epic fantasy-sized book, which is to say it is 200,000 words. Could you have shortened that pace by making those night attacks reports? 100% you could have.
Yeah.
You could have increased the pace of the attack.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
that is actually one of the techniques of increasing pacing, is instead of having a scene where you show it, like a POV character demonstrating it, you have either a telling of what has happened or a report or some kind of summary of the events that took place that basically just moves the reader past the event.
yeah. And you know, another option is innocent POV. You could have a narrator that's telling about this stuff, and then they tell about what. So I don't ever drop into the head of one of the knights during the night attack, you know, during the night battle or whatever. But I tell about what happened to them and you know how it is. But again, omniscient always ends up being more telly than showy. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's a lot of options. I'm not, and I don't think there is a right or wrong way to do it.
Mm.
As long as you go with the rule that I always say, the writer doesn't get to decide if they have succeeded in their story or not. So
Yeah.
you go, oh, you know what? The best way to do it is going to be to jump around through all these heads. And then you let a bunch of people read it and they're all like, no, this sucks. Well, then you failed. It doesn't matter if you liked it.
Yeah.
Or like in this case, it sounds like, because I haven't read that series, but it sounds like you're digging it. And so like you're the
I
one.
am, and I mean he's got a whole bunch of reviews and he's got a whole bunch of awards, and I think he hit a bestseller list somewhere. So he's clearly doing it right
Yeah,
enough, you
yeah.
know.
And
Um,
that
yeah,
is how we know that the book was a success.
yeah,
You know, how are readers relating to it?
yeah. It is a different style. I will say that, but I mean he has done very well in making the world and the core characters very interesting.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But that only loosely kind of grazes the topic of pacing.
yes.
Um, so all right, so there's really two levels that we should probably talk about pacing, maybe even three levels. There's scene pacing, there's novel pacing, and then there's saga pacing. If you're doing, you know, if you're doing standalone books like a Dresden Files, where yeah, it's all Dresden in every book, but each book is it has a beginning, a setup, you know, a rise to the climax, and end, and the book is over. You literally could just read it and be done with it. I don't think that you have to worry so much about pacing because each book is almost kind of like a standalone. Really, the pacing would be when you
It
have a
it get
saga.
it gets more it gets more like a series towards the
Right,
later books.
right,
Yeah,
exactly. Because then each book starts carrying over to the
yeah,
next.
yeah,
But I'm really referring to the beginning ones,
yeah.
which are the only ones I've read. I just know that they do start kind of piling into each other.
Yeah, I don't think you could read changes if you didn't know what's come before. Like for example.
Right, right. That's what I've heard. Um, so I guess those are the three things: scene pacing, novel pacing, and then a saga pacing.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on? I guess let's start at the granular level. Start with scenes.
So I think with scenes, one of the most undervalued and things that people need to look at is sentence structure and sentence length in the pacing of your scene. If your sentence lengths are all the same, if your sentence structures are all the same, it becomes a very sing-song read. So when you're pacing out your scene, like, and I know that this sounds super freaking technical and, you know, you want to talk about the pacing of events and how you unfold things in a scene and so on, and sure. But on a purely technical level, on a purely craft level, look at your actual sentence structure. Do you vary your sentence structure, or is everything the same structure? Is it, for example, I have a terrible tendency to have like a simple sentence with a gerund attached. Like, and I have to work to vary that structure in my scenes so that I don't hit a sing-song pace.
Yeah. Well, and that's funny because not that I think you're wrong, it's just that I would consider that structural pacing versus story pacing.
Mm.
But like one of the weird things that I did when I started learning this stuff, 25 years ago, I also started realizing that there are types of information that you give to a reader throughout a book and a lot of times throughout a scene. So I started breaking it down of, oh, okay, so there's narration where I'm just describing stuff. There's inner narration where I'm describing more of what the character's feeling, what they're thinking, what their motivations are, and everything like that. There's dialogue, there is action, and then there's like world building, info dumping, whatever. And so I started training myself to literally write different sentence structures depending on the mode of writing that I'm in. So like when I'm in scene building, I tend to write a lot more longer sentences, either compound sentences, compound complex sentences, whatever, because it's Drake walked into the kitchen, picked up a pot, filled it with water, and put it on the stove to heat. It's all this big long run-on sentence, but it's longer sentences are going to slow down the pacing. And so when I'm world building, when I'm setting the scene, when I'm making sure where you're at and grounded, I actually kind of want you to slow down a little bit and kind of pay attention to the details that I'm building out. But then I get into an action scene and you will notice that I use way more. I'm still using all the sentence structures. I'm still using a simple sentence when I'm describing a room. It's just less of them and more of, compound and complex sentences. Then you get into an action scene where you'll get a lot of either simple sentences or simple sentences with a gerund attached to it, front or back, and almost no complex or compound sentences, and then no complex sentences. It's just too long of a sentence to add to it. So I just kind of trained myself, and now I don't think about it. When I just move into action, my sentence structure just changes and the sentence just shorten, which makes it read faster and feel faster.
And I think that we cannot overemphasize this point because I still, on Critique Circle, even with some experienced partners, encounter action scenes with complex sentences. If you are writing a fight scene, the way to increase the pacing is to write short, sharp sentences with strong verbs. That is how you write an action scene.
And I'm going to say something very controversial here.
Okay.
Stop hating on ing words. Like,
Yes.
I get it. I get that it's this stupid academic, oh, we can never have any ing words, but there is a difference to the human brain when they read, um, you know, running through the kitchen versus ran or, runned. I'm looking for a ED word. Obviously, it wouldn't be runned, but there is a difference between those. And ings, a lot of times, feel more active than the ed version of it. So a lot of times I will look at, like, when I add a gerund, so running into the kitchen, comma, Drake slipped on the banana peel. The reason why I like that sentence structure is because running into the kitchen, as opposed to Drake ran into the kitchen, comma, slipping on the banana peel.
100%.
The ing verbs literally convey more motion to me. They can convey more action to me.
I agree with you. I think the thing that people hate on about the ing verbs is it is often attached to was. I was running.
Right.
I were running. Anyway,
I was running. You're
I
100%
was running.
right. Drake was running into the
Yeah.
kitchen.
And that you need to avoid.
Right.
Because
But then
was is a weak verb.
but that's where we go to wases are always red flags.
Yeah.
You're not going to cut every was out of your manuscript. If you do, you'll write stupid sentences, but every was should be looked at. So, Drake was terrified. Okay, well, that's a crappy tell because you're
Yeah.
using was as a linking verb. Drake was running into the kitchen. No, stronger to write Drake ran into the kitchen. So yeah, we definitely want to avoid that. But when you have especially with your gerunds, and since I use so many gerunds, because my writing is so action based, and every time when I run into an editor or a beta reader or whatever who is more English grammar based, that is the number one thing for 30 years I've been fighting. And I don't think they understand why. They were just told, oh, grammatically, in academic grammar, we don't write the ing verbs. Great, but we're not writing grammar. We're writing creative
I'll tell you
writing.
something funny. There is actually no grammatical rule against splitting your infinitive.
Right.
Okay. It is a rule, like you know what a split infinitive is. It's where you have two and then a word and then the other word.
Yeah.
Right? You could absolutely have split infinitives, and it's grammatically correct. It's not grammatically correct in Latin, but we're not speaking Latin.
Right. Well,
So
it's even like, go ahead.
just to agree with you on the academic point, like they have this crap holdover from nonsense.
Right. Well, another thing I get, this is a little off the subject, but another thing I get popped for is I like a good cliche. I like them. There's a reason why they became cliche. They convey a ton of information in a very short amount of time. And so, like in the Harn World story that I just wrote, this guy is picking on somebody else because they're large and kind of clumsy or whatever. And the cliche that came to my mind is like a bull in a china shop. Now, they don't have technically they have bulls, but they obviously don't have china shops. Like it's not that world. And so the line that I used was, yeah, he's like a haru in a pottery shop. Now, if you're not a Harn World person, you're not going to know that a haru is basically a large boar-like creature. But you know what a pottery shop is. And you've also heard a phrase close enough to he's like a haru in a pottery shop to know the image to paint. And yet when I turned it in, one of the guys at Harn World was like, this is cliche, you should cut it. And they actually wanted me to cut it down. Their original idea was to cut it down was, I actually think I wrote, he's like a drunken haru in a pottery shop. That's what it was. And they were like, you should just cut it down to he's like a drunken haru. And I'm like, they were like, but it's cliche. And I'm like, that's literally the point. It's the point is that it's a cliche. The point is that with that one statement, I can introduce a fantasy monster and also 100% never lose a single reader ever.
The worst part to me about people who go like, it's cliche, is sometimes it's like this that you just brought up. It's not actually even a cliche. It's an idiom.
Right.
It's an actual idiom. Like, come now. That is not cliche. It's a phrase that people use.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And so those things, and it just reminded me, like I said, from the ing words, because of the fact that it happens to me even to this day, it happens to me where no readers notice it, because again, when I'm using an ing word, it's because it's the right verb to use. It conveys the image that I want to convey, like running into the kitchen. You actually see someone physically running into the kitchen. If the line is Drake ran into the kitchen, then your mind is going to paint Drake standing in a kitchen. You're not going to paint him actually going into the kitchen. He's already there. Yes. And so it's just a different thing. So one of the people in the chat had said, when we were talking about sentence length and all of that, they had said it's like how people talk when they are telling a story. They're slow when they're in their setup, but as they get to the exciting part, they get excited and they start talking faster and getting louder and all of that stuff. And yeah, it's the same concept to me, because I'm telling a story in your mind. And so I'm not there. So I need you to do that part for me. I need you to get excited and you to get louder and you to read it in a different way. So 100%.
Yeah, so I think like we've spoken about the different kinds of information in a scene as like a pacing element of the scene. And we've spoken about the sentence length and the sentence structure in a scene and how to vary that. And that, I think, is how you kind of pace the scene a bit.
Well,
Another technique you can use in the scene specifically is you can start in media res.
mhm.
Yeah. So to start in media res means to start in the action of the scene. So you don't start with scene setting. You start with, like, you know, I get hit in the face with a fist, and that's the start of the scene. And then, like, then tell about, like, the wall that I stumble into and do a little bit of scene building there and so on. And that obviously starts the scene very fast.
Yeah, the thing you have to worry about with that is, and we talked about this all the time about how do we scene set. We try to scene set not in clumps, although, you know, I am way less concerned about this than you sometimes, but I don't mind a paragraph in the first couple of paragraphs. It just kind of do this big broad brush stroke of the room we're in or the alleyway we're in or something like that. Just get it. But it's broad. There's no real great details in it. It's, you know, it was a dark and dingy alleyway that smelled like this, and, you know, this is what the walls were like or whatever. And so it's just kind of a telly whatever, but at least it grounds my readers enough that they're like, okay. And then, you know, they might get their face smushed up against the splintering wood of the warehouse wall. And, you know, you start getting these details as the scene builds
Yeah.
further and further and further. But either way, it's about, you know, if you are going to start in media res, that is one of the big tricks is you don't then want to have, you know, Murray got punched in the face while she was standing in an alleyway that was comprised of 15 boxes on this side of the wall and 17 boxes on that. Like, that's not starting in media res. Like, you have to understand that now your scene setting, a line here, a line there, but it's intermixed between everything that's going on. Now, when you reach a spot where you can pull the camera back a second and write 2 or 3 lines of this is where we're out on a big scale, great. But you can't start in media res and then do 3 paragraphs of setting the scene and the political um the
And
political attitude of the people in this area, and because
And
that's not.
please, please, for the love of tiny chickens, do not start in media res. Have a line or two of, like, the action and then go. She had approached the alleyway thinking that all would be well. I'm gonna read through your book and punch you in the nose. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, and it's more common than you would even think. So many times I will see a chapter start with a paragraph or 2 of action and then have a page and a half of stuff.
How we got here. Like,
Right,
dude, I'm interested in the action.
right.
Like, I
I'm
don't
already
care.
there. I don't need to know how we got here. I'm here. But again, that's where it's a lot of that's important to the writer. And so many writers get fall into this trap, and it really hurts their pacing because they fall into the trap of it's important to me that I get you this information. And
And
they
the worst part about that is you've just killed your person because
yeah,
you had this hella start. And then you said, but wait, I'm going to now take you by the reins. I'm going to take you by the hair, reader, and I'm going to drag you back past this point in time and deposit you in the past so that you can now plod forward again to the point where I've showed you the action.
yeah. But and even worse because it's never in media res on that. It's
Yeah.
it's it's all a info dump tell to get there. It's
Yeah.
not even like you jump back in time and I'm in the head of the character walking, you know, preparing for this thing, and then stuff comes out. It's which would also be bad.
Yeah.
But it's not even that. It's a like you said. When I entered the alleyway, I wasn't thinking I was going to get punched in the face. I was actually thinking about Priscilla and her, you know, beautiful golden blonde hair. And I was on my way to her because I had a box of chocolates and I was going to finally ask her out on it. Like, what? No, what are you doing?
Exactly. And so don't do that. Don't start in media res and then give me the backstory of how I got there. You've just slaughtered the pacing. You dragged it behind the sauna, you shot it, and you buried it,
Along with your little chickens.
along with your little
That
chickens.
was the best line ever. Never heard that one yet. Um, or tiny chickens, I think is what you choose. for the love of tiny chickens.
Tiny chickens.
Yeah, but there's a lot of things to deal with pacing within a scene. And a lot of it is, and like I said, we talked about this a little bit last night. It's always crazy how much every single time we do one of these, it's like, oh, well, last night, at least we go in the writer's room. We talk about a lot of stuff in the writer's room.
Yeah.
But no, last night we were talking about a lot of pacing for me through a scene is feeling. Like one of the things that was funny about the guys at Harnworld, so they're not story writers, they're more encyclopedia writers. They've created, for 20 years, they've been creating this fantasy world, and they've got an insane amount of detail in it.
Yeah.
And they know a lot about different things, but they don't know detail, like the lives, the living of the life of it, because that's not their job. Their job is to create a world that lets someone else live a life in it, a DM buy it and run a campaign in it and have characters go through it. So I had spent for the 25,000 word story, there's a 20,000 word synopsis that I made. Now it's got more detail in it than I normally do, because I was copying, like I was going through their books and going, oh, this is what this plant that they eat looks like and smells like and tastes like, and this is what this. So I'm pulling. It's 20,000 words, but it has a lot of stuff that I pulled, copied and pasted. And then I also did detailed character portfolios on not just the main character, but all of the 7 characters that are in this story, the main ones. So it's just longer than what I do. But the funny thing is that when they then read the story, they're like, you didn't follow your synopsis. I'm like, well, I mean, I kind of did. Like, no, like in this chapter, he has a complete mental breakdown. I'm like, yeah, because that felt right. Like, because when I'm in the moment, like I had just gone through, you had this kid who'd never seen a fight before, and now he's watching children die horribly and women die horribly, and he's fighting for his life, and a couple of his friends have been murdered and slaughtered right next to him, and all of this stuff. And now he's walking through this room with just probably 300 dead people that were alive 2 hours ago, and they're just brutally murdered and slaughtered. And as I'm writing the scene and describing it, it just felt right to me to slow the book down and really wallow in the mental pain and anguish that this character is feeling. And that wasn't in the plot, when I was plotting it, it was just they're going to move through this scene. But when you get into the moment, I'm living that life now, because that's what I'm doing when I'm writing. I'm living these characters' lives. I was just like, yeah, I can't take this anymore. I am literally freaking out. And he literally just breaks down, and he has this mental breakdown where he's just like, I can't, no, I can't do this. No, this is, I can't do this anymore. And so it slows the book down to a crawl at that moment. Of course, that's what the reader needs. That's what the reader wants. You want to experience that same thing. You've experienced these horrors with this character. But I can't tell you, like, I definitely didn't plan it. It's not in the synopsis. So it's a lot of my pacing is just, man, as I'm in that scene,
So,
when I need to speed up for action because I'm fighting for my life, or when I'm whatever, a lot of that is happening for me kind of in the moment as I'm coming through those scenes.
So there's 2 things I want to say. One is, we've had a question from the Peanut Gallery. For those of you who don't know, we are now recording these sessions with an audience in Zoom. So if you're part of the writer's room, even the free part, you can join the Zoom call and be our Peanut Gallery and ask questions. So one of the questions from the Peanut Gallery is,
the link's down below, but yeah, just to expand on what you said, you do not have to pay the monthly fee for the writer's room. There are a few things that you get in the free section. One of them is you can join us live when we're recording the podcast.
Yeah. So links to the writer's room down below. So one of the Peanut Gallery asks, does pacing always follow the character arcs? I imagine it doesn't have to, but I don't have examples. So yes. No, not yes, it always follows it. No, it doesn't. Okay.
Right.
And I'll give you some interesting examples that your character arc could be a character arc that ends before the climax of the book. Your character could be a character that dies before the climax of the book. That's possible. And then the character's arc pacing is very different from like the book pacing. You could have intense stuff going on around the character, like with these horrors, you know, you could be in the middle of a battle and the character could have a mental breakdown. And that changes the pacing. One of the most interesting, effective, and I want to say completely surprising things in Blue Eye Samurai, that animated show that I refer to occasionally, is episode 5 has got the craziest weird pacing that I've ever seen, and it works. They have a battle scene going on in the present, in the now of the story. Okay. Then in the future of the story, you don't know this at the time, but in the future of the story, they have interspersed into the scene a framing device of a puppet theater show where they're telling the story of a Ronin and his quest for vengeance. And then they've got interspersed with that, they have flashback episodes to the main characters like past that link back to this Ronin show. And it works so well, despite the fact that this is kind of character arc pacing interspersed with intense combat scenes and so on. So your character arc pacing does not have to match your plot pacing. It does normally, but it doesn't have to.
Well, and a lot of this has to do with the style of writer you are and the story that you're telling. So, like when you look at me, we've already talked about how much of a singular point of view. I mean, I am, in my opinion, I'm one of the only people that writes in true third person limited. Everybody else, you know, will whatever, but I really, and it's a limitation. It's not a good thing. I mean, it is a good thing for me, but definitely it puts me in positions like I said, writing Carnage of Karaz. It made me realize a big weakness of how focused I am on my writing style. It has plenty of advantages as well, but like with everything, there is no such thing as an advantage. There's only trade-offs. So if I get an advantage, I'm going to have a detriment as well. So because of how I write and because I'm so ingrained, I bring my characters so deep, my readers so deeply into my characters, then yes, my writing style means that my pacing of my story is 100% linked to the character. So like the scene that I was just talking about, the city is still under attack. The other characters that are around my main character, they're having to deal with something completely. They're like, dude, you can't have a mental breakdown here. This is not the place. This is not the time. We are all in danger. Like, I'm sorry you're having an existential crisis, but no, you're going to get us killed now. And so their pacing, even though it's outside of the story's pacing because of the fact that you're in the POV character's pacing, I still try to, let it infect his story where everybody else is in this dude, we're making a mad dash for this thing. Like, you can't stop in this room of dead bodies and have a little, pity party. I get that that slows your story down, but the rest of the world around you is moving at a different pace. And so I do try and make sure that the reader gets to feel that external pressure that's hitting them. But the reality is, the story itself that you're reading comes down to a crawl pacing wise, because you're in the head of a character who's literally having a panic attack. So he's thinking about dead girl eyes and, severed grandfather hands and all this horrible things that he's thinking about.
Yeah, 100%. And his arc has slowed down, right? But there is by what I mean by overall pacing of the stories, I mean, the story is still thundering to its climax.
Right. Sure. I mean, I'm magic handing it because obviously I don't have the orcs attack that room at that moment and then have the friends fight this while he's doing this thing, because I could, but it would actually hurt what I was trying to do in the story.
100%. But there are absolutely ways in which you can have the orcs attack and be telling that story.
Right.
And that's what I mean. Like, it doesn't have to be. You make the choice to attach, but the character arc, and this is especially applicable in saga levels, okay? A character's arc, like their growth arc, could climax in different points of the saga from the overall story. I mean, if you think of something, like the big epics, like Mistborn or something like that, like Kelsier's arc completes before the climax of the story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, from that perspective, a character's arc, even in a limited POV, a character's arc can finish before the overall story.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So what are some tricks and tips that you have for speeding up or slowing down an actual scene?
So if you want to slow down a scene, paragraph, like I'm big on structural control, okay? Because what you want to do is you want the reader to actually consume the information at a slower pace. But what you don't want is you don't want the reader struggling to consume the information. Okay. So you don't want to put in like five line long sentences, like massive run-on sentences that are difficult to parse. That's not what I mean by structurally slowing the reader down. Don't make it hard to read. But if you put in paragraph breaks and more, and write longer sentences that have some more complexity, then you do bring the pace down as the reader consumes the information in a more step-by-step way. So the other thing is, if you linger into your descriptions, okay? So in a fast-paced scene, you're going to quick fire your sensory details. Like he punched me in the face, his glove creasing along my jaw, something like that. But if it's a slow thing, she caressed my jawline,
Yeah.
the velvet cloth of her gloves lingering on my beard, rasping through the hair. Like, there is more intensity in the description. And that slows the reader down because they're consuming the scene in more detail. Whereas in an action scene where you're rapid firing those descriptions and sensory details, it feels to the reader like they're getting smacked with quick, jerky scenes.
I actually have a page that, if you don't mind, I'll read from Genesis when Clytus uses his magic for the first time in combat. Because one of the things that I do with that magic is it actually stops time. So basically you have this action, 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 and then I literally stop time for a couple paragraphs. And it's exactly what you're talking about, where it has to do with how much details am I putting into it and where am I at. So are you cool with me reading about a page?
Yep.
Kind of illustrate this?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Clytus was walking through town, and he basically he knows he's being hunted by a group of people called the Blood Priests. And he walks around a corner, and there's a couple of them standing there. And he's like, oh, well, crap. And so he turns and goes down a side alley. That's where we're going to kind of pick it up. Pushing himself into action, he slipped north into a narrow alleyway. As soon as the buildings blocked the men from his sight, he ran. Left, right, straight. He let chance and whim decide his course through the squalid back streets. The scent of rotting refuse filled his nostrils, and the uneven cobblestones jarred his every step. He ignored it all. All he cared was keeping to a westerly direction, knowing the safety of his villa was now his only hope. After more than 10 seasons traversing the city, Clytus could almost navigate it by instinct alone. That honed intuition kicked in as a flanged mace materialized from around a corner aimed at his face. He gasped, heart pounding, as the weapon's iron head glinted in the dim light. Throwing out a hand, he pushed off the warehouse next to him, redirecting his momentum. The mace whistled through the air, smacking the wall with enough force to splinter its unpainted wooden slats. Pivoting, Clytus faced his attacker. As he moved, his sword slipped free from its sheath with a whisper of metal on leather. A steel saber forged by the essence during the War of Power, Deroshi stood a pace long. In addition to an etched guard and pommel crafted with artful precision, it held an edge so keen it had never needed sharpening. He doubted it had an equal. 3 brown-skinned men, all dressed in sailor's garb, spread out across the alley. Each held one of their damnable flechette crossbows. A fourth, the burly man wielding the mace, who had failed to take his head off, hovered behind, a wicked grin painting his thick lips. Grim-faced all, their eyes left no doubt about their intent as they moved to cover all exits. Footsteps betrayed the inept stalker's approach from behind Clytus, informing him that he was surrounded. 5 to 1, no less. As a single entity, crossbows began to rise. Clytus opened himself to the full onslaught that was Sujin. And see, here's where I want you to really revel in what it feels like to have this power. So this is where you'll see that I completely changed the pacing of the scene. All of that was pretty fast paced, and we're running and gunning and all this stuff is happening. So Clytus opened himself to the full onslaught that was Sujin. The raw essence tore through the bonding stone embedded in his palm like a tsunami, raging up his arm and filling him to the brim. Time froze as Sujin ripped him from reality, unshackling him from the physical plane for a moment. He shivered as the power invaded his body, his skin feeling as if it should burst under the strain. Everything around him snapped into needle-like focus, clear as glass. It overwhelmed his senses. The faded coloring of the individual splinters of the cracked and broken wood from the mace's strike, the foul stench of rotting fish heads mingling with human waste dumped into the sewers, the softness of his silk shirt pressed against his skin, the bead of sweat cascading down his left temple, the unevenly worn heel of his right boot. He always became lost in the details Sujin brought with it. So, like, you see 2 different complete pacings, and they happen on a dime from each other. And even before then, he's just walking through town and he's thinking about these problems, and he knows someone's following, but he's never been able to figure out who. So he's worried about that, but he's also thinking about this quest he's going on and all this stuff. So that pacing is much slower. He turns a corner, blood pressure in front of him, and he's like, well, crap. And then, you saw that he books down an alleyway just trying to escape. So a lot of the pacing, like you said, is controlled off of how much detail. And if you notice, I'm even giving detail through the more action, the faster scenes, because I'm constantly dripping detail through my stuff. Some people don't like as much detail as I put in, and that's fine. I'm not for everybody, but I am a very, very detail-oriented writer. I like to paint a very vivid picture in my reader's imagination. But still, during the running gun scene, it's much faster. And then this is the first time the readers are going to experience this type of magic. And so I want to take a moment to really allow them to kind of take this in. And so I put a crap ton of details, and they're not even details that matter. The sweat cascading on his cheek, the uneven heel of his boot. Like, these are things that are not going to affect anything. He's never going to think about them again, but it still forces the reader to slow down and take a moment while this is happening. I describe the men, it says, with time frozen, Clytus could afford a moment to study the men. I describe what they look like. And then it ends with the line at the end of the paragraph where I'm describing it. It says, nevertheless, all 3 favored each other in look and build. Time snapped back into place, and Clytus shot forward in a blur of motion. The three priests finished leveling their weapons a fraction of a moment before 4 crossbow strings slapped prods in a perfect harmony of death. Enhanced by the essence, Clytus shifted faster than humanly possible, directly at the left-handed priest. Like, now we're just, like, the pacing of the story is now lightning speed. And so that's really how I kind of control my pacing. It depends on, it really is focus. What am I focusing on? Am I focusing on the blow by blow by blow? Then it's going to feel like we're moving very, 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 very fast. Am I focusing on a more esoteric moment where we're going to step back and think about something bigger? I'm going to use bigger sentences. I'm going to, slow the reader down. And I'm constantly changing speed,
Yeah.
pacing throughout a scene.
I think it's also underrated how much you can control the pacing through the movement of your characters.
Mhm.
Like if you have your characters move from one place to another, touch something, be distracted by something, you automatically slow down the pacing. Like Clyde is getting distracted by he's worn a boot heel, etc., etc. You know, if you have a character who's in an airport and they're looking at a fast food joint and then they hear an announcement and then like all of these things
Or
slow down
or
the
on the other
scene.
side of it, they're late to catch that flight, and so they're running
Mm.
past blurred face after blurred face. Um, like now you're
And all
giving
they can hear is the announcement.
right,
Like,
and they hear a
yeah,
buzzing in their ear as some
yeah.
annoying person gets on,
Mm,
the least amount of, when you tone down those details, it makes it feel more frantic and more rushed, and
exactly.
then you can look for things like his stomach grumbled as the as the odor of hamburgers and fries assailed his nostrils, but he didn't slow down. Like,
Yeah,
so we get that little detail, but it's still this frantic running and gunning. And
yeah.
so pacing is just, it literally is that. It's all about what are we focusing on
Like we
during that
say,
moment.
we talk about like you need to stop to smell the roses. And it's exactly like that. With your character, when you need to speed up the pacing, they don't smell the roses. They're running past the roses. The roses are barely brushing against them.
Yeah.
But when you want to slow down the pacing, they smell the roses, they absorb the roses. The roses speak to them. Their little petals open, and the inside of the rose is this perfect image that tells you of the philosophy of the cosmos and the moment when it all opened like a flower.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that for me is pacing on a granular level. And a
Yes.
lot of it is just it's twofold, I guess. One, it's what I want the readers to focus on. So, like in that scene that I just read, obviously, I want you to take a moment and feel what it feels like to kind of be unshackled from time for a second. And then I want you to feel like, because when Sujin feels a character, they're only ripped from time for just, I mean, for the rest of the world, it doesn't even look like they were ripped from time. But for them, they get, and why did I do that? That's actually the plot device that I came up with because it
Mm,
allows me to do exactly what I do there in that next paragraph. I got to, right before a fight, describe what four guys look like in detail.
mm,
One has a burnt face and he's missing an ear, and this guy looks like that. And this, like, so it allows me this ability to set the scene in a very slow way, but
mm.
it doesn't break the action because I've just set up, time is frozen. And then I want you to feel what happens when we snap back in, and now it's just all fight. But the cool thing about that is what that gives me in these fights is now, like if you notice the line that I read, he headed straight toward the left-handed priest. Well,
Mm.
how can I use that as a descriptor? It's because when I was slowed down, I was like, oh, and this priest is holding the crossbow in his left hand. That priest has a really tiny head, and this priest, is missing an ear. And so I already set everything up. So now that I want to hit the action, when I say left-handed priest or tiny head or whatever, where they are already. You know where they are in relation to the character. So I can fly through that.
I just want to say one other thing about pacing, and this isn't just about scene pacing, it's overall that we were talking about slowing down a scene and writing slow, reflective scenes. I feel like a lot of the problems in a lot of modern storytelling, especially in the TV genre, is writers do not slow down. They do not give stories the space and the time to breathe. They don't give characters the space and the time to absorb the impact of what's going on and what has happened to them. It's just like, vroom, through
Yeah,
to the plot. And that creates poor storytelling.
yeah.
Like, not everything has to run at 1,000,000 miles an hour. You can take the time to slow the story down, to give the reader the opportunity to absorb not just the plot, but also the impact that it has had on the characters and how the character feels.
And setting up the stakes. Like
Yeah.
obviously, Clytus is fighting these blood priests. The stakes in that moment are they could kill him. Okay, great. But what does his death mean?
Mm.
Like, how does that affect me as the reader? And so until I have the scene where you get to spend time with him with his ailing son and see how much love is between them, and then the scene where, you know, him and his wife spend a last night together in intimate embrace as, you know, he's about to go off on this very dangerous quest, that's when you start going, oh yeah, no, this matters. You know, this guy matters, his life matters. It's not just the the stakes of losing your life. It's the stakes of, if he was to die in that alleyway, his son dies. His son does not get better. The only way his son gets better is for Clytus to go on this quest to get this thing that his son needs. So you can't do that. Like, I could shove it in there. I could shove in that fight scene, you know, oh, the mace almost took his head off. And so he thought about how the fact that if he had died, his son would then be doomed to a year of misery and death. Like, but that's, first of all, crappy info dump. And it's not really setting the stakes up correctly.
It's not going to absorb the reader in what his son means to him.
Right.
And that's the thing. Like, that is why showing is powerful, because showing takes the reader into what that emotion feels like and what those stakes mean at a deep level.
100%.
But showing does take longer, so be aware of
It does take.
that.
Well, so
Yeah.
this month I've got an advanced preview of the rewritten first book of Genesis coming out. And I think the craziest thing about it is it's just the first 15 chapters. It's 70,000 words long. So it is literally the same length as the first Harry Potter book, but it's only the first 15 of 60 chapters. So yeah, when you write showy, when you put in details that you can't put in details without putting in words. And so it's going to make the book thicker. It just is. There's no way to get around that. And then that's why pacing is so much more important, because if I had just written 70,000 words of just info dump, telly, puking, people would slog their way through it.
So I think let's take a step up and talk about pacing at the book level.
Yeah.
Speaking. So obviously in a book, you do want to build up to a climax. You do want things to go faster and faster. But what does that mean for your chapters?
For me, it all comes down to stakes and motivation. So for the climax to build intention, the reader has to have a deep understanding of what is actually at stake for these chapters to mean more and more and more. So, like that scene from Clytus that I just read, you know, you've been with him all day. You know that he was thinking about his son in the morning and he was actually witnessing this thing so he could tell his son because his son couldn't be there. And then, you know, you find out that he's actually going on this very dangerous journey to collect a thing that the healers need to heal his son. And then you learn, you know, that the healers are actually asking for a payment that he doesn't want to give, but he's like, you know what, screw it. I don't care. Whatever I've got to do to heal my son, I will make that payment to you guys. And so you've watched him do all this stuff. And then that fight happens. And so you know at least that he's actually trying to do something for his family. But I really wanted that fight scene, because it is in Act 1, it is early on. I wanted that fight scene to be more about him saving his life and you being concerned that he's going to die because now you like him as a character, than the bigger picture. Which is why it isn't until his last chapter that he makes it home and he has this, you know, and I actually read it on one of our podcasts where he's in there with Cyril and he has that really touching moment with his child and relays what he told him he was going to relay and all this stuff. And then he has to deal with the fact that he's lying to his son on different things because some things have changed and out of his control and all this other stuff. And the reason why I do it there is actually to increase the tension and the stakes as he moves out of the city. as he moves into the wilderness, as he goes into danger to try and get this thing for his son. And so a lot of my pacing has to do with that. And then the chapters are decided basically on, and I still love how you talk about it. It's do I need to give my readers time to breathe? So going back to the Karaz story, the reason why I like that chapter where he has the mental breakdown is because we've had literally 2 chapters of running and gunning and running and gunning and running and gunning and death and destruction and fighting and barely surviving and all this stuff. And I'm about to have the climax because it's a novella. It's only 25,000 words long. So this is the chapter between the first 2 chapters of the fight and the last 2 chapters of the fight. And so I wanted to give the readers a moment to realize how much this is actually impacting him, how difficult this actually is for him before you get to the big bad, before you get to that final climax of it. And so, yes, it slows the story down, but I would never call it a sagging middle because of the fact that because you just lived that, you are also primed to have a mental breakdown with him, even if like it's a story and you're like, whatever. And if that chapter wasn't there, you would have never felt it. But by putting that chapter in and slowing the story down, I now force you to have a mental breakdown along with him. I force you to go, oh yeah, wow, this is really bad. This is terrible. That was a dead girl that we just stepped over. Like it forces you to have to reconcile. And again, like you say, to take a moment to breathe. So that's how I deal my pacing. It's all a lot, as I'm going through the novel, it's all a lot about how do I build stakes and how do I give the reader time to consume those stakes so they really understand why this is so detrimental. And then let's go to the next thing that's going to try and take those stakes away.
And I think that that is one of the key things that you need to understand about the escalation. It's not so much that you escalate, like, yes, of course, in some books you are escalating towards a war. You're escalating towards the climax of a battle. You're escalating towards, but you could be escalating towards anything. Okay? You could be escalating towards a verbal confrontation. You could be escalating towards a magic ritual. You could be escalating towards a choice. It doesn't matter what the climax is. The thing about the climax is it is the last and final test of the stakes for the character. And what you need is to make the stakes more and more important to the character. It needs to be a higher and higher cost that they're carrying with them. If they lose, the cost feels immeasurably higher with every confrontation, whether that is they are rolling a dice, they are swinging a sword, they are casting a magic ritual, they are
Trying to
kicking
get
a
their
soccer
love.
ball. Hmm?
Trying to get their love.
Trying to get their love, playing a sports game. Like, it doesn't matter, right? The climax can be anything. It's about the escalating stakes. And then when you reach it, you have that lack of stakes. You have that stakes that's so high.
I'm going to add one thing to that. There's another way to really help your pacing, and that is also sacrifice. If your characters never sacrifice anything along the way, then the stakes, in my opinion, start to feel hollow. So I like to give my character things that the reader knows, oh, this is it. I can't lose this, or I'm over. And then when I build up the stakes above that, now technically for the story, I can sacrifice this thing that yesterday you thought was the be all end all. I mean, think about any teenager, teenager like, oh my goodness, if I don't get an A on this test, my life is over. And then us adults are like, I don't even remember what tests I took. I don't even care. Like those stakes are so low that I don't remember what class I was taking that year. Like, who cares? It doesn't affect your life. You're not gonna, you got these people that are like, oh, I'm gonna kill myself if I don't get it at least an A. And it's like, yeah, that's not. And so I think about that, and that's a good way to help understand the pacing of it, because we can set up something that is that, oh, I got to get an A on the test, and it is the most important thing, and the reader buys into it. But then the story moves on, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, a werewolf is going to kill my mom. Like, so I can sacrifice studying for the test and lose that. And I do have to suffer for it. I mean, it still was important to me. So it's not like I can go, oh, well, that's not important anymore. I'm going to do this. That's not what I'm talking about. We sacrifice knowing that we're sacrificing because now the stakes have gotten higher. And so that raises also, we can run our pacing through that.
I also want to just stop a moment here and talk about the importance of character death at this point. Not the POV character's death necessarily, like secondary and tertiary characters that are important to the POV who have died previous to the climax increase the stakes, because if they have died so that the POV can achieve victory, their death serves as an increase of the stakes, because if you then don't succeed, their death doesn't have meaning.
Right.
Well, that's how the POV feels about it. And that thus increases the stakes. So you can look at each sacrifice. If you do the sacrifices correctly, okay, you can look at each sacrifice as like a thing that you add to your stake meter to push your stakes higher and higher to make your climax count and to increase your pace.
And death doesn't necessarily mean death. I think one of the most brutal, so Carnage of Karaz is a story, you know, for those that aren't in Harn World, it's a pivotal moment in this world's history because this dwarven city is sacked and everyone dies. Like 20 people survive this attack. And so that's the story I'm writing. So obviously it's not a happy ending story. So I created this group of young friends that get caught up in this and have to deal with it and all of that. It's told from one character's perspective. Obviously, there's a lot of death in it, but I think one of the most gut-wrenching deaths is a character who doesn't die at all. But he does die. He just basically gives up. I'm trying to say it without giving too many spoilers away here.
Yeah.
It is such a sad moment, and it is such an impactful moment that I think it's probably more impactful than when you get to learn, you know, when you fall in love with this friend of mine and then watch that friend die versus what happens. I think it's the most brutal of the deaths, and he doesn't die. Now, you assume that he's going to die. But you don't get to see that. But it is a very, very brutal because it's more of a decision as opposed to whatever. But it's a pivotal moment for the character to understand, because again, everything is for the character, and that means that everything is for the reader because the character is the reader. So I agree with you 100%, those deaths around it, but it also is just, it's not just deaths, it's really just sacrifice. It's sacrificing what they love, it's sacrificing what they believe in, sacrificing what they gained, what they thought they had, what they thought was important. Any of those things makes it to where now if they don't succeed, the stakes are so much higher because then all of that other stuff was worthless. All of that other stuff became meaningless for this journey.
But it's interesting because it gives you a different perspective on like Martin killing everybody. Because the first few deaths up the stake, but after that, it does feel meaningless.
Yes.
Because it's too much sacrifice.
Yes. Well, and also a lot of times they're not even sacrificed. They're just snuffed. So like I've had this argument with Game of Thrones fans where Ned Stark's death was worthless. It meant nothing for the story.
So I disagree with you, but I have a different reason from it from the people you disagree.
And we've already discussed.
Yeah, we've discussed that. Yeah.
But yeah, that's people that got, you know, invested in the TV show. They started going, I don't care about any character, and I'm never going to allow myself to care. And again, that's that beaten dog syndrome. You beat a dog long enough, and they stop doing whatever it is you don't want them to do. And so that's exactly what has happened with Game of Thrones.
And the problem with that is you then have no stakes.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. And then you can't really up the tension.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
I think it was a huge mistake. And I get that I'm saying that from a position of I've never sold anywhere near that many copies of books. And I'm telling him he's made this huge mistake. I get the irony in that statement.
Yeah.
But I do think it was a huge mistake to just, because the funny thing is that I probably got that idea when I was 14 or 15,
Yeah.
that I was going to write a book and I was just going to introduce characters and make the reader love them, and then just kill them for no reason. And then just introduce and kill and introduce and kill and introduce and kill. And it made me giddy. I was, as a writer, I was like, oh, this is going to be a great thing. And then Game of Thrones came out and I was like, oh, no, it actually sucks. That's not a good thing to do to your readers.
Yeah. But yeah, so I do want to just talk about a saga level pacing before we close off, because this podcast is getting long in the tooth. So one of the very interesting things in reading Adrian Tchaikovsky's Shadow of the Apt is that it is a massive series. It is a 10-book monstrosity of a series. Okay? And they are like Jordan's books, they are, door stoppers. And I noticed in the reviews, because I do like to check reviews, of books and so on, see what's coming and so on. I noticed that there was a big dip in like people's opinion on the post book 4 books. So starting at book 5. And I'm now on book 6, and I can see what the problem is. And it's this. Book 4 builds up to a climax that ends a war. Okay, the war actually ends. Then book 5 obviously dips down. The saga continues because there's still escalating stakes in the saga. But the war, this big war that you've been building to for 4 books, has come to an end. And the problem is that the reader's expectations are up here because it's all part of the same saga. But now you're in the post-war, dealing with the post-war events phase. And it is very hard to go from here to there. Like, we do it in real life all the time, obviously, but it's hard to do in a story to get that big a drop.
Yeah. And you mentioned before the show, probably the best, or one of the best ways to think about fixing that would have been to reset the reader expectations by starting it as book 1 of the next series.
Of the next series.
And
The
even literally
related
change nothing.
Yeah.
Change nothing. Just call it book 1, and
Yeah.
readers go, oh, okay, I'm starting at the bottom. Because
Yes.
everybody knows we're starting at the bottom and we're moving up now.
Yeah.
And he probably didn't even need to change the title, didn't need to change a single word of any of the chapter 1 or any chapter in it. He just tells them it's book 1. And it's weird how expectations, how much, well, so like when Aragon came out as a movie, me and my wife went and saw it, and we were like, this is gonna be terrible. It's gonna be horrible. It's gonna be the worst movie ever.
Yeah.
And we walked out of there going, it wasn't as bad as we thought. It was, it was entertaining. As opposed to other movies that were way better movies, better written, better acted, better, the whole 9 yards, that we went into going, this is gonna be the best movie ever. And we walked out going, it wasn't that good. It wasn't that good. And yet it was still like it, but it was just the expectations that we had going into it.
And that's 100% true. And that is actually the reason why I decided to split my saga, my Sangwheel, into multiple series, because the peaks are too high.
Mm-hmm.
And from and you have to, so you've built up to this massive peak of a war. Now you need to bring the pace right back down to the post-construction phase, like the picking up the pieces phase. And you cannot go pace up to Mount Everest and then say to the reader, okay, now follow me, back down to sea level.
Yeah. And as dumb as that sounds, it really, a lot of what we do, and I talk about this a lot in the writer's room, a lot of what we do is psychology.
Yeah.
It really is that simple. So it's not about the telling of the story. It's about the telling of a story in a way that's going to impact the psyche of the reader. And as dumb as it sounds, if they had finished book 4 and like, that's it, that's the end of this saga, join me for the next one, which takes place tomorrow, from that saga, but it's book 1, new saga.
Yeah.
Just that little expectation may have fixed everybody's opinions of it.
Yeah.
So
Because,
somebody,
because it's like the reviews were, the pacing feels slow. Yes, the pacing feels slow. We've just come out of a war
right,
climax.
exactly. So somebody posted something in the chat about
Yeah.
the movie Halloween, and it's exactly what we were talking about. So at the beginning, some of the teenagers get killed, but really they're considered the adults, whatever. And then at the end, the main POV character is actually trying to protect the little children. And that raises the stakes so much because death is on the table.
Yeah.
Like death is a perfectly acceptable, but you could use that exact same thing for Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Some of the adults get eaten by dinosaurs, but then there's these two little children we have to save.
Children always raise the stakes.
Mm-hmm.
Always. Like it takes a very weird reader to go like, oh yes, the death of a child is the same as the death of an adult. Like it's not. It hits different.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a reason why in the Carnage Garage, I literally take a moment to step over a dead little girl.
Yeah.
Like, I want to show, there's a couple times babies are mentioned and stuff like that. Not dead, but they're going to die.
Yeah.
I'm just not gonna do that on screen. But there is, for Western sensibilities, we value children.
No, all sensibility. It takes like we have proof that Neanderthals saved their injured
Oh, no,
children,
I'm not
like
saying that.
cave people. Like it goes like this is a human thing. Yeah.
Mostly. I mean, there are cultures that do not value children at the same level as other cultures. So it just, you're right. It is a very human thing. We protect our offspring. That is the way it is. But there are cultures that protect them more than other cultures. That's all I'm saying. But we write for the West. That's what we're writing for. We're writing for a Western audience.
So we've got a comment here from the Peanut Gallery with the concept of splitting a series. Is it okay to keep the same POV characters with new arcs, or would it be a new set of characters? So it depends. In Tchaikovsky's case, if he split the series, it would have been the same characters predominantly. I am actually doing both. So my middle series will be in a different location with different characters. And then my climax series, my third series, will be a mixture of old and new characters. Or of the two trilogies, the two series characters. So it depends. You can have the same POV, you can have new ones. Because you're resetting at book one, you actually have an almost blank slate.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to remember that you do have a blank slate. You could have readers who literally pick up this book. So you have to do your world building again. And you have to do it in a way that doesn't annoy your old readers as well. Like,
yeah, that's
just
the
to
thing.
make life more complex.
And there is some things to think about. So look at the Dragonlance saga or series of books as a example. So we get, the Dragons of the Dragon series, the Dragonlance series itself, the first trilogy.
Dragons of autumn, winter, and spring.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And when we split off from there, like the next series was the Test of the Twins. So
that was a great series. Man, I love that series.
And we still have we have Karaman, we have
Rastlin.
we've got Tassoff for the most part.
Yeah, and the priestess.
Yeah, she was in there too.
Yeah.
So we have the same characters. We had some spin-offs, but I think there was a huge drop off of readership when the series, same world, same series, but it was now their children. I know that's where my wife bailed. She read the first book and she was like, she's not the same. So that's the risk you run into if you change too much.
So I agree with you, but I also want to say that I don't think that was planned by the so I feel like the children books were very much sequelitis.
Yes.
Like they were writing it because they had to write something in the Dragonlance world, and they were like, well, let's come up with something for the kids.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like, you
It
know.
does. It
It
does.
doesn't feel like a books that they really like. Time of the Twins feels like books they wanted to write.
Right.
Um, the first three Dragon, it feels like books they wanted to write. The books after that feels like books that they wrote because the money was there.
Maybe I would not argue that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's it is different.
Yeah.
So somebody else wrote another comment. So they were talking about how in the Bosch series, the main character actually ages so that in the current novels, he's in his 70s. So obviously he's not doing the same kicking down doors as he was there. And so, yeah, they brought in a new protagonist. Um, and now Bosch has become more of a co-protagonist. And I think that's what they were trying to do with the indie franchise. I think they failed miserably, but I think they were trying to pass the baton
Yeah.
to the next indie.
Two things. Pacing. I'm a ride this hobby horse till freaking movie writers start getting it right again and stop trying to cram in 50 storylines
Yeah.
into the space of one.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Just because you get
pacing
$500
the
million budget doesn't mean that that gives you any more time than 2 hours.
and that's the problem. Like, I don't know where this money goes, but it goes stupid places. It goes places that adds no value to the movie, like in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but they've got to stop trying to cram in so much so fast.
Yep.
Slow it down and tell the story properly.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to give the story time to breathe. You have
Yeah.
to, it isn't a roller coaster, right? I mean, some stories are, um, you take an action fueled nonstop. I mean, what was the
Speed. Speed is a good example.
but no, not it really isn't because there are plenty of scenes where they are just on this bus and they're talking about stuff. And I mean, they
Yeah.
slow it down. What I was
Yeah.
thinking of is the one that one martial arts, the white martial arts dude from England or whatever, and he basically it's hit with his drug that if he slows his heart down, he'll die. And so
Never seen it.
he literally he's just running through town and taking the biggest risks that he can take so that he's constantly in terror. Like
Mm,
he's jumping off of things and riding motorcycles by standing
mm.
on them and being shot at. And what
Sure,
was
but then that is your plot device, and you're not trying to tell another story at the same time.
right?
And that's kind of what I mean. It's like, if I think of Rings of Power, for example, which the problem with Rings of Power is who needed the freaking grimdark hobbits? Nobody needed those grimdark hobbits. They could have left out that storyline and given themselves more time to do the other storylines justice.
Yep. That's why I missed the 22 to 24 episode seasons.
Yes, me too. Man, I miss those. Like,
Yes.
I will take way lower special effects for some 22 scene episodes with some bottle episodes. I don't know if you ever watched Stargate SG-1, but there was a bottle episode in Stargate SG-1, which is still my favorite, which is the one where they get caught in a time loop. But the only people who are aware of the time loop is Jack O'Neill and Tilk, and neither of them are super bright, right? They're not the two scientists. So they have to go through this loop like a bazillion times figuring it out. And at one point, Jack's like, I'm taking this loop off. And he plays golf through the through the gate and stuff like it's awesome. It's a
I
great
remember that
bottle
episode.
episode.
I remember that episode. So, two things. One,
Yeah.
somebody saved me. It's Jason Statham, and the movie was Crank,
Mm,
back in 2006. So you also dropped an industry term that I want to at least take a second to
mm,
define. So, a bottle episode is a movie industry term, or really a TV industry term, where we've gone over budget. We need to cut costs. So we write an episode, and everybody has seen this. You just didn't know you were seeing it. It felt like it
mm.
was just one of the episodes of the season, but literally it was written on purpose to save money. So they write an episode where they use one setting, one scene. So they only have to set up the film crew one time. They only use a couple of the actors. They don't even use all of them. So they don't have to pay them because, actors get paid per episode they're in. So they can save costs that way. And it's, like there's a Friends episode where half of the cast gets stuck on an elevator. That's all. And now it feels like an episode of Friends. It just feels like it, but it's not. It's literally, they went, wow, we need to save some money. We've gone over budget. Let's make an episode that's going to cost us basically a third of what a normal episode costs, and we can get back on track. So that episode, because I didn't remember it until you said the golfing. And I was like, I do remember him going through there and golfing and just literally going, nope, I'm taking this one off. I don't care. But so you just have the tunnels of SG1, just the base, and nothing's going on. And they're just doing this loop over and over and over again. And that's, you have one camera set up, you have one scene, one setting, one everything. You send half your crew home because they're just not needed. You send half the cast home because they're not needed. You don't have to pay any of them this episode. It's usually on something that you already own, so you're not paying location fees. So like that was obviously in their studio, in their soundstage, which is where they had the SG1 base set up at.
The other thing is, a bottle episode also quite often doesn't deal with the direct plot elements. It deals with like the, a character development or whatever. So you do this kind of focusing in on.
Yeah, that's why it feels to the audience like it's a part of the series. But in actuality, those come out of nowhere. Those are literally a top-down decision where, the executive producers will be like, spend too much money, make a bottle episode, get us back on track. And so the writers will have to then go, oh man, what are we gonna do?
But I miss bottle episodes, man. They were great.
Yeah, you do not have them anymore.
Never.
An 8-episode season.
You never have bottle episodes, but bottle episodes were amazing because they would let you explore a character, a part of and it would really let you connect with that character. Like, oh, I missed 22 episodes.
Yeah. And just to do one last shameless plug, because I am poking at it again. So one of the cartoons that I've written that I'm trying to get produced, I was going to do all in-house, and then I got cancer and haven't gotten back to it, but I've actually started poking at it again. But the entire show is a bottle episode because I'm going to do it internally. So it's two guards. It's called Guards, and it's two guards standing in front of a gate, and they're talking. And no one shows up to the gate. No one goes through the gate. They never leave the gate. Like literally, it's just two guards standing there talking, and it's hilarious. But the entire show is a bottle episode so that it can be really, really cheap every single episode, because I need 2 actors. I need, we're doing it in 3D, and I've already got the 3D assets and all of that, but it means that make the assets once and you just move the camera around as you animate these 2 guys that are just standing there talking. So yeah, that's come back onto my radar. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do it. I know I won't be able to do it this year, but maybe next year I'll start actually spending a little bit more time on thinking about getting that done. If there's any animators out there that just want to work on a project that's a passion project, that's really what I need. I need some animators that can just sit down and crank out, because I've got the show written, I've got the actors, I've got everything to do on the post-production. I just don't have labor for somebody to actually just animate the characters as they're doing their thing. So if there's any 3D animators out there that just want to do a passion project as slave labor, I'm your guy. Hit me up. All right, anything else on pacing?
No, I think that we have reached a good and natural point to say that that is a good place to end this episode.
Bye.
Good day to our esteemed listeners. I'm Marie Mullaney, and it has been a pleasure guiding you through the nuances of writing and world building. If our podcast has enriched your authorial journey in any way, please consider liking and subscribing. Sharing our content with your peers is a powerful way to support our mission and ensure we continue to deliver insightful and valuable episodes. Your engagement is greatly appreciated. For a deeper understanding of the topics we've discussed, head over to Just in Time Worlds on YouTube. It is a treasure trove where fantasy meets history and science. Every Tuesday, you'll find new videos that delve into the intricacies of world building, drawing from our rich real-world history. Whether you're a writer, a role player, or just a fantasy enthusiast, Just in Time Worlds offers unique insights that will enrich your perspective. Check it out and join the journey of crafting incredible worlds.
If you are ready to take your writing to the next level and work with a group of highly motivated, dedicated writers who are all working to not only improve their writing, but improve your writing, plus you get to work with me on a weekly basis, then I'll encourage you to check out writersroom.us. This is a website that I have created that I really wish I had 30 years ago. It's everything a writer needs to become a better writer. Not only do we do weekly critique sessions, both from other members as well as me, we have daily writing sessions, I do monthly classes, Q&As, we have activities, I do all sorts of learning exercises, such as I do a quarterly writing prompt contest, and just tons and tons and tons of things. So if you're ready to get serious about your writing and you want to actually finish that novel and have a chance of it being published, then I encourage you to head on over to the Writer's Room and join me there. And as a special promotion for listeners of Releasing Your Inner Dragon, I'll go one step more. If you would like to get 50% off for 3 months, reach out to me. There's a million ways you can do that. You can do it through starvingwriterstudio.com, drakeu.com, any of my social medias such as LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever. Reach out to me, say that you would like to check out the Writer's Room for 50% off, and I will send you a link that will allow you to do just that. So hopefully you're ready to start getting serious about writing, and I'll see you in the Writer's Room.